Hey everybody. I feel like I haven't been talking to you from my car for a long time. I have been in Hartford a lot recently, and particularly on the days when I do this video, I've had to do them from my office. So it's nice to be in my car, actually about to run some errands in the district. I feel very grateful to be back in the district for a few days. So I missed last week, and I've been in Hartford for the same reason, that it was the Finance Committee and the Appropriations Committee's JF deadline this week, and that stands for Joint Favorable, which it means the JF deadline is the deadline by which a committee must complete its work, meaning all bills that you want to pass out of committee must be passed out of committee by that date. And our JF deadline was April 1st, April Fool's Day. But of course, bad practice to have an actual final meeting on the day of your deadline, for those of you trying to get your homework done on time. So we hold our final meetings on the 2 days beforehand, and we vote bills out of that. And for us so again, as a reminder, so JF stands for Joint Favorable, and there are two ways to vote a bill out of committee with a favorable report. Of course, sometimes you put them up for vote and they lose, and that's an unfavorable report, which means they're not going to the floor of the House or the Senate. The joint means they're joint committees, meaning all committees in the Connecticut legislature are both House and Senate committees, which not all states do, and certainly Congress does not do. But are or JFS, sorry, and JFS language, that S stands for substitute language, and that basically means bills that have been amended between the time that we hold a public hearing, at which we listen to the testimony and we talk to advocates and we talk to each other in screening meetings of the leadership of the committee, and sometimes we decide those bills need to be amended, and that's what S stands for. So bills get voted out of committee either with a JF, or a JFS, which means they've been amended with substitute language. And in the Finance Committee, for us, that means nearly all the bills we pass, of course, because we are the Finance Committee, have an impact on revenue. So they either produce revenue, and we have a few of those, but mostly one, that actually produces revenue for the state of Connecticut, and most of them are have a revenue loss, which means there are tax credits that reduce the state's amount of revenue, for example. So we have a bunch of those bills, and then we have some bills that affect revenue policy, and they're not necessarily, they don't necessarily have a cost to the state. For example, this year we have one, which is basically a fix to a bill last year, but it relates to the solar capacity tax that we created last year, and we had to change a date. So that bill, important bill, we need to make that change, but it doesn't have a revenue impact one way or the other. So that bill will probably run by itself. The rest of the bills are all kind of proposals. The ones that make it out of committee, they're proposals that have the support of the majority of the members of the committee. But the most important bills to come out of the Finance Committee and the Appropriations Committee are the central, for us, it's the revenue package and the bond package. And what we do is the governor proposes a budget every year, and that forms, there's an appropriation side and a revenue side, and for us it forms the revenue package. And we use his bill, we amend it always because, it's a negotiation and the legislature has some different things to say. So that was a JFS. We took his bill, we amended it. We took a lot of things that he included and kept them, and we changed others, and we added a few new things. And that is the revenue package. And so that's our sort of statement that this is what we want to consider. These are our priorities. We have these other bills that passed, which means they're eligible to be included in a revenue, in a budget at the end of the day, because they've had the support of the committee and they've been heard and gone through the process. But they're not at the revenue package is our opportunity to say these are the ones that are most important to us. We have this is the second year of a biennium, so generally not a year that you see a lot of big changes. But those are, we have a lot of, so that's what last weekend was taken up with, was sort of finalizing the bills that were going to get support out of committee and figuring out which ones we could fit into the revenue package. Now, another note here is that we have to build our budget off of what our projected revenues are for the state. And we do that. We get projected revenues from the Office of Fiscal Analysis and the Office of OFA and the Office of Policy and Management, which is part of the executive branch, OPM. They jointly by consensus, project what our revenue is going to be. And they do that several times a year. And the one that we build our budget on is given to us the end of April. So we really can't have a final budget until we have those final numbers. So that because we're done in session, normal session by May 4th, that's a very short turnaround. But we have ideas about where it's going. And now the appropriations also passed out their side. We passed out our side. And now we start to meet regularly, first as a sort of ways and means of approps and revenue, getting together and making sure our budgets match up and form a balanced budget, and engaging, of course, with the governor, who had different proposals, and I was our understanding he's willing to compromise on some of them, maybe not others, and we have the same. So be with family and neighbors and friends before we start that in earnest. I want to note another thing that has consumed the rest of my time legislatively when I wasn't doing budget stuff was about trash, solid waste. As many of you know, there's a lot of conversation. The arrangements that many of the towns in the Northwest Corner our municipal solid waste used to go to a facility in Hartford owned by MIRA, Materials Innovation and Recycling Authority, which is since defunct. And so there's a conversation about the Torrington Transfer Station, which is where we currently are. Solid waste goes to the Torrington Transfer Station, and then at the moment, because we don't have access to a waste energy facility or any other end use for solid waste, it's now being shipped out of state to out-of-state landfills, which is not ideal, and we're trying to work on that. But in the meantime, we want to make sure that the towns of the Northwest Corner have leverage for figuring out having a public facility that they can use to negotiate and to engage with those in the business of solid waste, hauling and recycling, and all of that. And so a lot of conversations about what's going to happen to the Torrington Transfer Station, which was a bit complicated, but we had a hearing yesterday and a lot of great testimony from throughout the Northwest Corner in favor of keeping that facility a public facility. So that also has taken up some time, and I'm hopeful that that will continue to move forward, although it's got a lot of moving pieces. I also sprinted home in time to, I got to go to a dinner event for the 21st Century Fund, which is a wonderful fund that supports activities and trips for students and faculty at Houstonic Valley Regional High School, and heard from a lot of wonderful students about and teachers about wonderful things that they've done and how they both have learned and grown from the experience. And that was really nice to be able to come home just barely in time for. And yesterday, there was a play performed at the Capitol, written by, a Goshen resident, Kathy Kelly, and performed first, sort of incubated at the Goshen Players. And it's based on letters written between a young woman and man during the Civil War, who kind of barely know each other at the beginning, and how they get to know each other through letters and fall in love, get married, and have family. It was really, really lovely. And I think it was the first time that kind of thing ever happened at the Capitol. So that was a really fun experience. I hope we can do more of that. So I wish you all happy Easter, happy Passover. I hope you get to spend lots of time with your families, and maybe with some flower buds surrounding you, and spring in the air. So take care. I'll see you soon.